In this lesson I'm going to talk about the altered scale and how we can use it in the blues. So we're going to be building off some of the material we discussed in the last lesson on diminished sounds in the blues. So if you haven't seen that one yet, you're probably better off going and watching that one first and then coming back to this one. We're essentially going to treat the altered scale the same way we treated the half-whole diminished. So we're going to find where the 5-to-1 chord progressions occur in the blues, and we're going to play the altered scale based off that 5 chord. Let's just go over the intervals that we're going to get when we play the altered scale over the top of the A7 chord. So we're going to get the root note, we're going to get the flat 7, the sharp 5, the flat 5, the major third, the minor third, the flat 9, and the root note. Now let's talk about how we're going to create some simple lines using the scale like we did with the half-whole diminished. There's one problem that you will come across straight away, and that is that the altered scale only has 7 notes, whereas the half-whole diminished had 8 notes. So if you just play it down from the root note, it's not going to work as nicely as the half-whole diminished did. So I'm going to demonstrate that now. When we get to the bar just before we change to D7, I'm just going to play the scale and see which note I end up on. So you can hear we kind of end up on an awkward note, this G here. So how do we deal with that problem? Well, we can just get rid of one of the notes, and sometimes I'll just get rid of this E flat on the G string, this 8th fret. So what if I just play the same line and just get rid of that note, and let's see where we land. We just played the same descending scale from the root note. We just left out that 8th fret on the G string. We ended up resolving to the 4th fret of the D string, so I'll just play that line again for you. Works really well. So straight away we have one method of how we can play just a simple descending line. Just leave out one of the notes. Right, we could try playing a descending line from a different interval now. So why don't I try it from the minor third on the 8th fret of the E string, and I'm going to do the same thing, see where we end up. Let's give that a go. Again, we landed on a pretty awkward note there. We landed on the 8th fret of the D string, which is the flat 9 interval. We don't want to land there on a D because that's going to be basically this sound. So why don't we try the same thing we did before and just leave out maybe the E flat again on the G string, that 8th fret. There's other ways to do this. You don't have to always play 8th note lines, obviously, but we're just doing that to try to get the sound under our fingers and to try to get used to crafting these lines that are going to resolve at the right time. So it's a good place to start, just using simple 8th note lines, finding the intervals that work and the ones that don't, the ones where you need to leave out a note maybe to make it work better. Let's try another one. Let's try playing from the flat 7 interval on the 8th fret of the B string. Still just the A altered scale, and we're going to just play down from the flat 7 and see where we end up. Right, so still just kind of doing the same thing we did in the diminished lesson. Just playing the scale, right? But we're just trying to find out how we can make it work and have it flow nicely into the next chord. So there's a couple of descending ideas. Let's try a few ascending lines. I'm going to go maybe from the root note. Let's just see how that sounds if I just play from the root note on the D string up through the altered scale and see where we end up. There I just sort of played the next note on the 7th fret. I didn't want to end up on the 6th fret because that would have been the flat 9 and that would have been kind of nasty over the top of D7. So that didn't work that well, but maybe what we could have done is when I get down to the 5th fret on the E string, I could have just come back to the B string and played the 7th fret, and that would have been a nice note over the D7. So that would have looked like this. Pretty easy to just make that little change. Let's give that a listen. So that line again was just from the root note, and when I get to the 5th fret on the E string, I'm just coming back to the B string 7th fret, just to finish the line on a nice interval over the D. So it's all about creating tension and then resolving at a nice appropriate spot, right, for the next chord. So we want to try to find a chord tone that works really well over the next chord. Now that we've done some simple descending lines on A, let's just quickly look at the E7 going down to A at the end of the progression. One fingering for the E altered scale is using your 3rd finger here. I like to do this one when I'm playing an A blues because I don't want to venture too far away from that A minor pentatonic kind of area. So that fingering looks like this, 3rd finger start. Keep in mind that I could keep going along that B string and play the 6th and the 8th fret, which would be an F and a G there. So if I wanted to include those notes, I could like this. So what happens if we just do the same thing with the E altered scale, just play it from E down to E and just see where we end up and whether that's going to work when we get to the end of the chord progression. Didn't work very well, right? We ended up on a D, which is kind of an awkward note over A7. So why don't we try the same method we tried before, leaving out one of the notes. How about this line? So you see what I did there? I just left out the 5th fret of the D string, and then I kept playing down the E altered scale until I got to the 5th fret, which is actually like the next note under E in the altered scale. We didn't actually play this far down before, but I ended up on that D, and then I resolved it just next door into the 4th fret, which will be a nice note over the A7. So that line again was like this. So that worked pretty well. Why don't we try playing from the minor 3rd of the E altered scale, so from the G on the B string, 8th fret. Let's just play the scale down and see how that sounds. So we played 8 notes, and then the 9th note was kind of an awkward note, which is not what we want. We want it to be a nice interval over the next chord. What if we do the same thing and leave out one of the notes? That's going to work really well. So what did I do there? I actually skipped the 8th fret on the D string, the flat 9 interval, and I went straight to the 6th fret and continued down the scale. Let's try maybe playing the E altered scale up and see how that sounds as well. Okay, that doesn't really work because we're going to end up on an F, which is sort of an awkward note over the A7. Maybe I just come back to the G string and play a nice note over the A7 chord. So maybe like a C sharp. So that would sound like this. Let's try a couple of E7 altered lines to get us back from E to A. So now that we have some nice lines we can play using the A altered scale and the E altered scale, I want to talk about the chord that's actually happening in this moment when we play this scale, or what chord we're actually implying by playing this altered scale. This is important because we can actually use these clusters of notes from the chord and fuse them into our lines. I'm just going to show you a few ideas of how we can do that with the A altered scale in particular. So when we play an A7 altered chord, what are we doing? Well, we're just altering a couple of main intervals in the chord. In the altered scale, we're altering the fifth and sharpening it. So we're just going to move this note, the E, up 1 fret to F. So now instead of like an A7 with an E, we have an A7 with an F in it. I like to use my thumb on the top string on the 5th fret, and I just leave the A string out of it when I play this chord. Then I grab the D string with my first finger on the 5th fret. Then I just use my 3rd finger on the 6th fret of the G and B. That's going to give us the major third and the sharp 5. And then on the E string, we can find the flat 9 interval on the 6th fret here. So you can actually just bar the 6th fret on the bottom 3 strings there, and you'll get an A7 flat 9 sharp 5. That will look like this if we play that chord. Now we can actually add one other alteration that was in our altered scale, which is called the sharp 9. This is a bit confusing as well. The sharp 9 is just another name for this note C, which is our minor third. It's like three frets or 3 semitones distance from A. But we call it the sharp 9 in this context, okay? So it's all to do with context. So that's this note down here, 8th fret. We can actually grab that with our pinky. If you keep that bar on the 6th fret, on the bottom 3 strings, and then you add the pinky on the 8th fret of the E string, you're going to get a sharp 9 instead of a flat 9. So that would sound like this. We could actually play one and then the other if we wanted to. The goal here is to create tension, right? Sort of a tension over the chord, and then we're going to resolve by moving to D7. If you watch what happens with the notes, they kind of just slide over either to the left or to the right when we go to a D7. Let's grab this A7 sharp 5 flat 9 chord and then play a D7 straight after, and let's hear that tension and then resolution. It would also work really nicely if we went over to the left here and played like a D dominant 9 chord. A7 flat 9 sharp 5 into D9 would sound like this. Now, one other little chord grip I want to show you and talk about is really sort of the bottom half of this sharp 9, A7 sharp 9. So if you just take like the 6th fret little bar here with the first finger, and then we add this 8th fret, the sharp 9 interval, we can play it the other way as well. Now, if I just play that, instead of playing it like a chord, if I just play the notes sort of in order like that, and then I can slide over to the 5th fret here into my A altered scale and continue down the scale, I'll get a line that sounds like this. Or if I want to create a longer line, if I play 8 notes, it's going to sound like this. That sounds really cool because you've got this kind of vertical, chord grip up here, and we're sort of getting through the notes of the chord a lot quicker. Then we're playing a little horizontal kind of line to finish off our A altered line there. So why don't I try that in the context of a loop, and let's have a listen to how that sounds. So at the end of that little bit of playing there, I did do a little ascending line. I kind of played from the 8th fret of the D string, which has our flat 9 interval, but like down the octave. And I sort of just played up this little minor chord shape, or what looks like the Stairway to Heaven chord, right? You can kind of think of like the B flat minor chord shape to create little interesting lines or ideas. So if I play something like down the A minor pentatonic scale, and then I play maybe up, there we have 8 notes. That's going to work nicely. Then I need to resolve to a nice note over the D. Well, I could just sidestep here and play the 5th fret, and then we would have this line. So I'll do some playing and I'll play you out now. And I'm just going to combine all of those sort of ideas that we talked about. The extra little idea at the end there being the A7 altered chord grip, then looking at the shape of that and realizing that it kind of looks like a little minor chord. And we can actually use that chord grip to help create some cool lines as well. And so I hope you got something out of that lesson. Let me know your thoughts in the comments and how you went. And I hope you enjoy working that new sound into your blues playing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers, guys.